the current developments may indicate that hydrogen will be used also for cars, and there's a big requirement for the infrastructure and so on.
Exactly.
What?
Which is, to my mind, somewhat unnecessary, but yeah, it's batteries will do it perfectly well. I don't see why people should complicate the situation by, again, with this relative inefficiency. There may be some situations like taxis, for example, if they're going to be on the road high proportion of the time and refueling is an issue, maybe, but I say refueling is getting so fast that even that I don't see as particularly attractive. So I tend to think, even though there's an early adoption of hydrogen in light vehicles, cars, I don't think there's a big future in that. I think batteries will do fine. And as you say, the network issue is a huge issue for that. Electricity is everywhere, hydrogen isn't.
Now, going to the colors of hydrogen, there are already many contracts signed for blue hydrogen, and of course, we should strive for the green one. How do you see this unfold?
Yeah, blue hydrogen, if you really have a tight system and you can sequester the CO2 in decent available formations, yeah, okay. I like what I call turquoise hydrogen, though. I don't know whether you're familiar with that one, where basically you take natural gas and you get two hydrogen molecules out of it and carbon. And the carbon, people tend to say, can be sold anyway. It's true. But if you did it on the scale that I think might be really significant, you can throw the carbon away. We know that carbon is utterly stable in that form, as basically graphite. And we know that because if you look in places like the Amazon rainforest, you'll find soils that have carbon that's been left over from Aboriginal people's cut and move burns that been there for hundreds of years, and it's still there. It actually improves soil fertility too. So it is a possible route. And where you haven't got good geology to allow you to use blue hydrogen, then turquoise hydrogen, although you're only getting half the hydrogen out of it, would be a reasonably good route. Again, of course, you have to be reasonably careful in terms of the leakage of methane when you're producing it, but the industry has got a lot better at that than they. Well, when I was first involved with this, they use natural gas pressure to power their instrumentation at the gas wells, and just vented. They're just using the pressure. They're not changing at all, just vented the gas out. That sort of thing has stopped. So they're much better at that now. But turquoise, yeah, it's a possibility. And there is a lot of work going on to support turquoise. Pink hydrogen, of course, is just a misnomer if the electricity comes from nuclear in the first place. And I'm a nuclear person and proud of it. It's not really a distinction. It's as green as the best wind and solar.
So getting the hydrogen with nuclear, is that at least part of the solution?
Yes. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, even if you left hydrogen out of the picture altogether, I don't for one moment believe that the world can get sufficiently off fossil fuels without a good chunk of nuclear. And I think that is increasingly being accepted everywhere, perhaps except Germany.
So will we be there on time to stop the climate change with the current deadlines and activities?
That's a loaded question. And the answer is that question can't really be addressed. And if we could somehow turn it all off tomorrow, that would be great. To get ourselves to a point where we start emitting less somewhere within this decade would be probably as much as we can hope for. But it'll be a real struggle. And the impact on climate is already quite obvious. To give you an anecdotal example that comes very close to home for me, we live normally in Canada, in what's called Central Ontario. And in the 50-some years that I've lived there, the normal first frost would have been about 21st of September, give or take a little bit. This year it was well into November before we had a killing frost. Other end used to be that you couldn't plant things in your garden till about May the 24th if they were frost sensitive. Now you can put them in at the beginning of May with very little concern. So clearly the seasons are shifting, and shifting quite consistently, and sea levels are rising. Perhaps most importantly of all, although it's not talked about as much, the oceans are acidifying, and that is having fairly profound effects and could have worse effects still if we let it continue. And for that, the sort of the ultimate solution that's talked about, some of the geoengineering solutions at least, won't do any good. So there's unless you somehow can go the route of ocean fertilization with iron filings and sequester a lot of carbon that way, that's a potential geoengineering solution. Also, a lot of people don't seem to like the notion. If you're just going to play with the incoming insolation from the sun, either extraterrestrially, which is one of the wilder schemes, or by seeding the stratosphere with sufficient quantities of sulfate, you're not going to address the other problem, the CO2 acidification problem. And that really is a big one, because so much of the bottom end of the life chain of the oceans is tied up with shelled zooplankton, and they are going to find it increasingly difficult, just as corals already are, to form their structures, because the water has got more acid.
Even if we get there on time.
Well, I mean, it's going to be a question of how hard can we press to get there. We've already changed things substantially. It's a question of how well we can apply the brakes to stop it from becoming even worse. And one of the interesting things that I discovered relatively on, we did quite a bit of sort of second order climate modeling using surrogates for the big meteorological models. And one of the things that really surprised us at the time was that the effects of changing the CO2 emissions had a 20-year lag. So things that we do today, presumably better things, aren't really going to change the outcomes for about 20 years, which gives you some idea of the desperate nature of the situation we've got into.
So this means that some things that we already done are not reversible, or yes?
All of the things that we've done up till now are not reversible, not easily reversible anyway, and their full impact has yet to appear. And we've really only been increasing the CO2 levels significantly since about 1960, but at increasingly rapid rates in the latter part of the last century. And only now we're sort of beginning to level it off. I mean, ultimately, perhaps they are reversible in the sense of technologies that will take CO2 out of the atmosphere. And some of them are more natural than others. And if you can improve the uptake by increasing forestation, that would be a positive thing. But some of the others are really worrying in the sense that the survival of existing forests and any new forests depend on your containing forest fires. And as temperatures rise, danger is that you're going to have bigger losses to those. And perhaps worse than that, in the high Arctic regions, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, you have vast quantities of peat bogs and methane clathrates, the sort of methane ice that's assisted by the presence of methane. As temperatures rise, those become increasingly unstable and can produce a very nasty feedback effect, or an amplification effect on top of what we're doing ourselves. So I'm really quite deeply concerned that we are going to have to face a future that is, even if we're working hard finally to address the issue, it's going to be an uphill struggle, both from the delays in the system and from these secondary forces that will act to amplify what we've already done.